It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are doing a bonus mini-sode. It's just a quick shot to set some stuff straight. John, we got some news today. Tell everybody what we learned.
Well, what we learned is that was filed in the Lee v. Zuffa class action case was an objection to the settlement. It was filed, I believe it says it was filed January 22nd, but it only showed up on Pacer today. So that's why we saw it today and talked about it. And it was filed by Carla Lomeli, formerly known, probably better known as Carla Esparza to UFC fighters, to UFC fans, I should say. And her objection was to the request for attorney fees. She had a complaint about that. She objected to the attorney fees going to the attorneys who for the settlement, and she objected to the money in the Lee v. Zuffa settlement fund being used to pay for Nate Quarry to settle his individual identity rights. So that was what was filed today.
All right. I have some questions. First, let's address Nate Quarry. Can you tell me what he did from start to finish? Because he knew from almost the beginning, like within weeks of this thing being filed, he knew he wasn't going to be part of the case. But he still did many, many things over the last decade to help this case along. Can you sort of give us an idea of what he did?
Well, I don't know if you knew for sure he was out of the case when it filed. He was one of the original 3 people that filed this complaint in San Jose, California, all the way back in December 16, 2014. So you got to remember, so he's one of the very few fighters that was willing to file this case back when it happened. They had a few names that actually dropped out, some pretty big names that dropped out. And I'm not going to name one of them, but he's a major star. Actually, there's a couple major stars that decided not to take part, but one major star dropped out like a week before the filing. And, you know, it's not too hard to figure out who it is, but I'm not going to put him on blast here about that. But he dropped out. So they had 3 fighters stuck with it and filed. So think this case might never have happened if they couldn't have gotten the fighters to file. He was one of the 3. He was part of what's called the identity class. Remember when it was originally filed, there was 2 classes, the identity class members and the bout class members. Identity class was about your image rights. And so he represented them as they went forward with the case, and he took part. And for years, he did all the stuff. He advocated for him, talked to fighters, other fighters, provided evidence from himself, all the stuff on behalf, showed up to the court when necessary, did deposition, did all this stuff on behalf of the fighters for years. And at some point it became kind of clear to him, but from the judge's reaction, that the identity class wouldn't get class certified, but he still kept working on the case, even when that happened. And then in 2023, when the class, this was class certified and it could move towards trial, and that's why we had a settlement, his class, the identity class, did not get certified. He still took part in representing the case, doing media appearances, showing up in court again for other events. So he's been in this for over a decade working on this case. And as part of it, they decided they were going to settle his individual identity rights claim from the money that they won. And that's $250,000, which would be the same as what the other named plaintiffs get as their bonus for being the named plaintiff. So they get their winnings they get as part of the class, and then they get a bonus of $250,000 each of them do for being the named plaintiffs in the case, the guys that brought this forward and did it. There's 5 remaining. So the other 5 are Kong Lee, John Fitch, Kyle Kingsbury, Javier Vasquez, and Brandon Vera. And so it's because of them they got the case. So that's what he's getting, $250,000. Now, technically, her complaint says, and accurate, he's not part of the class. And such, he should not get paid. And she's objecting the fact that you're using the settlement, any of the money from the settlement, to pay Nate Quarry. And some people, I think, would suggest that, well, why don't the attorneys just pay it? Because there are rules. Attorneys cannot just pay people. The attorneys can't cut off a piece of their winnings. The attorney's fees, they can't do stuff like that because the court have put in all these rules in place to prevent the attorneys from basically paying people off that way. So the money would, I'm pretty sure the money would have to come out of the settlement portion, the fighters portion, because the court would not allow them, the lawyers, just to pay people for that they do not have receipts for, in other words.
Also, it should be noted, too, that the attorneys accepted this on a contingency basis that, you know, we only get paid if we win. But the whole settlement is the win. Just because it stopped because the judge declined to let the first one stand doesn't mean that they didn't put the work in for the entire settlement, correct?
Not only did they work for free for 100,000 hours, the attorneys, they paid millions of dollars of the firm's pockets to pay for the experts, the travel, all these other expenses. And in fact, I think it came out to $10 million total, almost $10 million, which is, we were kind of surprised that it was that low. We thought it'd be higher. But the objection part she has in this is she objects the 1/3 attorney fees of the $301.5 million, the additional money. She objects to the additional money they got is the additional $40 million. So if you remember, they originally settled for $335 million, and 90% of it was going to go to the Lee class and 10% of it was going to go to the Johnson class. Then they came back and the judge threw that out. And so they came back with a higher settlement of $375 million. And she's objecting that they're going to get their hours they're going to bill and stuff is going to be 1/5 of this additional $40 million. I'm surprised she didn't point out that it's actually $73.5 million more than Lee was supposed to get. But they're objecting to the $40 million additional money that the attorneys are going to get 20% of that. Now, the one part, you know, she might have trouble. And actually, that's an argument you can make. You can say, listen, you get 1/3 of the original settlement, and then you didn't really do much, and there's not much work that's done during that time that you could get 20% of that worth in that short amount of time. So that's an argument you can make, and that's reasonable because $8 million added to the fighter's pot is a sizable amount of money. That would increase every fighter's payout by about 3%. Taking Nate Quarry's money away only increases your payout by 1/1000th. So it's, to me, that's kind of vindictive to go after Nate Quarry, petty, but going after the attorney's fees does increase the fighter's pool. So
may I ask one thing though?
Yeah.
She insinuates that not much work went into that extra settlement, but didn't Rob Macy basically work day and night to get all those declarations in?
Including hers.
Yes,
she's one of the declarations.
Exactly.
She wanted the settlement. But yeah, they did. But I mean, you could make the argument it's still not $8 million worth of labor.
I'm sure it wasn't.
But here's the thing you got to remember is based on their hours, that the 1/3 is the maximum amount they can ask for from the original settlement that they took, the $301.5 million. That 1/3 of that is the maximum they can take actually of any settlement, because that's the cap. There's a cap on what you can claim on as attorney fees. And so the 20% that they're taking of the additional settlement is to kind of fill the void that they have left on the hours that they've listed. Now, I don't know if the hours are accurate or not, but what I'm saying is that one way you can look at it is like, yes, you didn't do any additional work. The other way to look at it is that 20% they're asking of the additional money is to basically make whole the amount that they didn't get covered under the original settlement because there's a cap. Right. So there's many ways to look at it, but I mean, I'm not too outraged by someone writing a letter and saying, the attorney's fees should be lower, especially on the additional fees that the judge is kind of responsible for, that we should lower that amount so the fighters get more. I'm not, but going after Nate Quarry, saying he doesn't deserve $250,000 when I didn't see your name on the list. I didn't see you out there. I didn't see other fighters out there supporting this publicly until the very end now. That seems a little unfair to me. And also, I should note, I'm not even sure if this made the deadline, because it's 90 days after the judge that the order was put in by the judge, signed by the judge back in October 23rd, 2024, 90 days. So is it include that days or 90 days from then? If it includes, basically this is down to the wire. This could be a day late. This filing. So I'm not sure if it was January 21 they were supposed to be in or January 22. I think it was supposed to be on Tuesday. It was supposed to be the last day that any objections came in. So they might have missed the deadline with this anyways.
Okay. So basically, her claim towards the extra $40 million, which was improperly calculated because it should be $73.5 million because of the 90-10 split, right? That's where the
if we're talking about just the lead class, but I guess the argument could be it's $40 million in additional money because they did get a $335 million settlement back then. And I guess her claim is that since $40 million additional money has been added since then, they didn't really do any labor, that nearly as much labor as they're claiming to get that additional $40 million.
Right. But when you keep saying 73.5 million was actually the amount that it was increased, you start to break it down and then you get sidetracked and talk about something else. Break down how that worked. You said that 90-10 was the original split, but you haven't told us how that split ended up working out towards 73.5 million as opposed to the 40 million. Because most people seem to think that only 40 million was added.
Yes. So the original settlement was for $335 million. 90% of that was going to go to the Lee class, which is $301.5 million, and the rest was going to go to the Johnson class. Then the judge, protested and said, I don't like this deal. They threw it out. They came back with a new deal. And it would be $375 million would be the settlement only for the Lee class, not Johnson, because the judge didn't want them together. So $375 million now, and that's where we get an additional $73.5 million going to the Lee class. So the original settlement for Lee was $301.5 million, and now it's going to be $375 million. So the amount that was settled is only $40 million more, but the Lee class by itself is getting $73.5 million more for the fighters in that class. And then you can break it down. It's going to be split by 70% of it is going to go to your pro rata by your number, how much you made in the class, your earnings. And then 30% goes by is split amongst the number of bouts you had for the class. So, you can calculate individual fighters and, actually we can even, for Carla, we can kind of figure out her amount based on what we estimate, because remember, they released all the purses and we can kind of infer which fighters are which. I could be off a little bit, but she should be getting around, I guess, 150, 160,000 would be my guess. If all the fighters make a claim for the settlement. Unfortunately, I got a feeling based on the reaction from some fighters is that's a sizable amount. I don't know how many, but 10%, maybe more, will not file their claim if this gets approved by the judge.
And what happens then?
Well, then that money gets split amongst all the fighters. So the fighters' pool goes up.
And you noted something. You said that attorneys are restricted to how much that they can charge for a case like this. Typically a third, right? But when we interviewed Eric Kramer, the lead attorney on the case, their fees actually came in below a third, right? Didn't he say it was just a hair over 32%?
He said when you put the two together, he said when you put the amount that they filed before the original settlement and the additional money, and it ended up being like 30.7% was the total amount that they filed for. I do not know what their hours would have totaled for just the Lee class. We know originally they were asking for a third of the Lee class, the original settlement. So I imagine their hours total that, they hadn't done all their hours at the time calculated, but they do something called Lodestar where they go through, they got to submit all their hours to the judge has to approve it. So they're, even besides this, letter of protest, the judge is going to have to look at this and approve the hours given and then do a multiplier on it. Is that what they're getting paid fair according to the case, what the courts find fair?
All right. Anything else to wrap up our little mini-sode?
No, I was I was waiting for something like this to be filed with the court because I wanted a little excitement. And when we go to the hearing, maybe Carla will make be a surprise visitor. We need surprise witnesses to show up in the court. We need some mystery there.
And on that fine note, we are going to wrap up. Today's episode is free because we love you guys. But what y'all need to do is show us a little love and subscribe. Do me a favor, follow John on his social media. He is on X and on Blue Sky. Both of those he is at Hey Not the Face. I am also only on X and Blue Sky. I'm Crooklyn MMA on X, and I am Crooklyn on Blue Sky. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, shoot those our way. You might find yourself mentioned right here on the show. Y'all know the drill from here. Until next time, please stay safe.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!